Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where dust never settles. Gunpowder lingers in the air like a permanent cologne, and even the coffee fights back. You're in the Wild West now, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. Not because of some dramatic shootout at high noon, though, spoiler alert, that could happen too, but because every single second out here is a test of grit, luck, and whether or not you can keep your boots on your feet and your teeth in your mouth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far this little bedtime posse stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a room made entirely of creaking wood, from the warped walls to the sagging ceiling beams above your head. There's a draft slipping through the cracks that gives you goosebumps, but it's not just the cold, it's the way your entire body feels like it slept in a sack of gravel. The bed, if you can even call it that, it's a cot stuffed with straw and mystery lumps. Something moved under there in the middle of the night, but you were too tired to care. Sunlight is already spearing through the wooden slats and jagged lines. There's no alarm clock here, just roosters, yelling like they own the planet. Outside, a horse snorts. Someone coughs. A door slams. A gun clicks. You sit up, slow and cautious, like any sudden movement might offend the building. You're in a bunkhouse, one of those rickety, shared sleeping quarters where cowboys crash after a long day herding cattle, or chasing bandits, or just existing in this dry, dusty world. The air smells like old leather, sweat, and something vaguely like stew, but stew that gave up halfway through becoming food. It's already hot. Not beach weather, hot. More like, I think my eyeballs are sweating hot. Welcome to your first hour in the Wild West. Dragging your boots on takes effort. Everything is stiff, including you, blisters forming just from standing. You make your way to the main room, where a pot of coffee sits on a wood stove that looks like it once lost a fight with a bear. You pour a tin cup's worth, black, no sugar, no cream, no joy, and take a sip. Instant regret. It's lukewarm mud, seasoned with ashes and a vague metallic twang, possibly made from reused grounds, possibly made from dirt and ambition. Still, you gulp it down, because that's what people do here. Keep moving, keep sipping, and don't ask questions. Out the cracked window, you spot the town slowly waking. A general store sign squeaks as it sways in the breeze. A few dogs loiter near the saloon, suspiciously eyeing everything like little four-legged sheriffs. A woman hauls a pail of water with one arm and swats away flies with the other. Her face is already glistening from the heat and effort, and it's not even breakfast time. You try to breathe through your mouth to avoid inhaling another lungful of dust. Doesn't help. The Wild West is where lungs go to get exfoliated, apparently. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth did people willingly live like this? Historians still argue whether it was the promise of land, the lure of gold, or just sheer stubbornness that dragged settlers westward. Some say it was the Homestead Act of 1862, offering free land to anyone brave or desperate enough to claim it. Others think it was just wanderlust mixed with poor decision-making. Either way, here you are. Out back, the stables creak with life. Horses stomp and snort, annoyed by the heat, the flies, and probably your inexperience. One of them eyeballs you, flicking its tail with judgment. You reach out, and it promptly licks your shirt and walks away. Your stomach grumbles. Breakfast is somewhere in town. Or maybe it's just a slab of yesterday's beans reheated over a spitfire. Food safety isn't really a thing here. Pasteurization won't be popular for another few decades. People eat what they can find, catch, or shoot, sometimes all three in one day. And the people? Well, they're not exactly the welcoming committee. Everyone out here has a story they're not telling. Some are outlaws. Some are lawmen. Some are both. Depending on the day and who's buying the drinks, you step outside, blinking into the sun, and get your first real taste of the main street. It's less yeehaw adventure and more dusty limbo. Wooden sidewalks warped from heat. False front buildings trying to look more impressive than they are. And always the wind whispering secrets down the alleyways, like it knows something you don't. A passing man tips his hat and nods. You nod back, unsure of the protocol. He's got a revolver on one hip and a scar that could tell you stories if it had a voice. Another guy strolls by with a spittoon tucked under his arm. Why? Who knows? Wild West logic. As you step off the porch, you trip over something small and fuzzy, an armadillo waddling by like it pays taxes. You recover, pretending you meant to do that, and keep walking toward the breakfast shack where the scent of fried something hangs heavy in the air. Maybe it's bacon, maybe it's squirrel, maybe it's a dare, but your stomach votes yes. And so, not even 2 hours into your Wild West experience, you've already ingested questionable coffee, been judged by a horse, almost been taken out by an armadillo, and you're sweating in places you didn't know could sweat. You've survived the dawn, barely. You shuffle around the back of the breakfast shack, half hoping for bacon, half preparing for disappointment, and find yourself face to face with something far more urgent. The outhouse. There it stands, a slanted wooden box with a crescent moon carved in the door, as if trying to pretend it's quaint. Spoiler, it's not. The wind carries a warning well before you even get close. Still, the coffee has done its damage, and nature does not negotiate. You sigh, push open the door, and instantly regret every decision you've made up to this point. The smell hits you like a wall. Your eyes water. The floorboards creak ominously as you step inside, and you suddenly understand why so many cowboys preferred going behind a cactus. The seat? It's a plank of wood with a suspicious dark stain. The hole? Bottomless in theory, but filled with the echoes of poor life choices and probably a raccoon. You try not to touch anything. You fail. You sit, balancing like a circus performer, and try not to breathe. There's no toilet paper, just a communal sponge on a stick and a bucket of cloudy water. Yes, it's real. No, you don't want to ask questions. Historians still argue whether this hygienic method came from necessity or just a collective lapse in judgment. Either way, your dignity isn't coming out of this intact. And just when you think you've seen the worst, you hear scratching. Something is alive under the floorboards. Maybe it's a rat. Maybe it's a snake. Maybe it's the last guy who never made it back out. You bolt out of there, pants barely fastened, swearing off coffee forever. Back in town, you pass a few locals who nod politely, none of them saying a word. This is a place where people keep to themselves. Not out of rudeness, but survival. The less you know about someone, the less trouble you can get into when their name ends up on a wanted poster. Gossip is currency here, but so is silence. You pause by a horse trough and splash your face with water that's questionably shared between people and animals. It's warm, slimy. possibly used to wash socks earlier. Still, it beats smelling like the inside of the outhouse. Personal hygiene out here is more don't die than look good. You spot a bar of lye soap nearby, sitting in a puddle of yesterday's rain and today's regret. You rub it between your hands, which now sting from cracks and calluses you didn't have yesterday. Bathing? Good luck. The public bathhouse isn't open yet, and even when it is, it's a shared tub, lukewarm water, and one towel that probably has a name. Most folks bathe once a week if they're lucky. More often if they get into something particularly gross, like quicksand, manure, or marriage. Speaking of which, you pass a water pump next to the general store, where a woman with arms like a blacksmith is scrubbing laundry against a washboard like it insulted her ancestors. The soap bubbles float lazily through the air, mocking you with their cleanliness. She doesn't look up, just spits tobacco and keeps scrubbing. You keep moving. You wander down a side alley looking for a quieter spot to, well, exist. You find a man shaving, using a broken mirror nailed to the side of a barn and a straight razor that doubles as a letter opener. He sees you and grunts, "Mornin'." You respond, and then immediately question if that counts as starting a duel. Everything feels like a threat out here, even haircuts. Back in the day, barbers weren't just cutting hair. They were pulling teeth, stitching wounds, and occasionally removing limbs. A real one-stop shop. You duck into the local barber's cabin and see a rusty collection of instruments laid out on a counter that probably hasn't been wiped since Lincoln was elected. There's a chair. It squeaks when you sit. A towel's tossed over your face, still damp from someone else's sweat. Then the shaving begins, cold steel and hot breath. "Hold still," he mutters. You do. You've never held stiller. Suddenly he pauses. "You new around here?" "Great. A question with consequences." "Just passing through," you whisper. "Smart," he says. "You stay long enough. People start expecting you to shoot straight or ride fast." You nod, as if you do either of those things. By the time he's done, you've survived your second close encounter with death, this time by razor. You step outside feeling like a freshly peeled apple, but slightly more terrified. You pat your cheek, still attached. You'll count it as a win. You make your way to the local mercantile for some supplies, even though you're not sure what those should be. Inside, it smells like flour, sweat, and leather. You see barrels of pickles, stacks of dusty canned peaches, and enough salt pork to choke a wagon. There's a rack of boots and sizes that don't match, and shelves of jars labeled with things like lard ointment and bitters, snake venom cure. You don't ask what's in them. It's better that way. Quirky fact incoming. They used to sell canned bread. Yes, bread in a can. Imagine opening one and seeing a perfectly brown loaf slither out like it's trying to escape. Still, it kept well on the trail, just like hardtack, the baked dry biscuit that's harder than your moral compass and twice as indigestible. The storekeep eyes you warily. "Need anything, stranger?" You almost say toilet paper, but bite your tongue. Instead, you grab a tin of beans and a piece of jerky so tough it might be a roofing material. You pay with coins that feel heavy, not because of their weight, but because they might be all you've got left. Back outside, the sun has climbed higher, and your shirt is already soaked through. A dry breeze kicks up, and the dust coats your skin like seasoning. You try to take a deep breath and end up coughing. The air here isn't made for lungs. It's made for legends. And you? You're just hoping to find a clean place to sit. You find that a clean place to sit is an impossible dream, much like indoor plumbing or people who don't settle arguments with six-shooters. So, you do what everyone else does. You perch on the edge of the wooden sidewalk, just outside the saloon, pretending not to notice the puddle of something that might be beer, or blood, or both. The saloon doors swing lazily on their hinges, creaking like the knees of an old mule. You glance inside and immediately feel out of place. It's not that anyone's noticed you, it's that they haven't. A piano clinks somewhere in the back, a lazy, off-key tune played by a man who looks half asleep and three-quarters pickled. The barkeep is polishing a glass that was dirty when the sun came up and will still be dirty when it goes down. You step through the doors, and every eye does eventually swivel toward you. Slowly. Like they've all got sand in their necks. You pretend not to care and sidle up to the bar, like someone who belongs here. You don't. But you're trying. Whiskey, you say, because that's what people say in these moments. The barkeep nods and pours you a shot of something brownish that smells like regret and lighter fluid. You toss it back and immediately regret every decision since breakfast. Historically, saloons weren't just for drinking. They were for business, for news, for gambling, and occasionally for getting stabbed by someone who didn't like your hat. You glance at the poker table in the corner. 5 men, none of whom are smiling. A pile of coins and paper sits in the middle, but the real stakes are clearly higher. One man has his hand hovering near his belt, and you're fairly certain it's not because he's adjusting his suspenders. You walk away from the game and find a seat near the window, trying to blend in. It doesn't work. You stick out like a hymn at a gunfight. Outside, 2 cowboys argue over something you can't quite hear. It starts with words, then shoving, then suddenly they're in the street, drawing their guns. You blink, and one is on the ground, dust rising around his boots like smoke. The other walks away, holstering his iron as if he just swatted a fly. No one screams. No one runs. The piano doesn't miss a note. Welcome to justice in the Wild West. Here, the line between law and outlaw is pencil thin and constantly being redrawn. Sheriffs are often outnumbered, outgunned, and occasionally just as crooked as the people they're supposed to stop. That cowboy who just walked away might be arrested later. Or he might be made mayor. Depends on who you ask. Historians still argue whether frontier justice was born out of necessity or just a convenient excuse to skip court and go straight to consequences. Either way, you don't feel especially protected right now. A man next to you spits tobacco into a can with expert aim and leans over. "You see that fella?" he says. "Shot a man last week for looking at his mule sideways." You nod, trying to look appropriately impressed or horrified. You're not sure which is safer. Meanwhile, the saloon's upstairs doors creak open, and a woman in a corset descends the staircase slowly, dramatically. Her dress swishes like it's trying to escape her, and the room quiets just a bit. She doesn't glance at you, thankfully, but you realize now why the poker players were so distracted. Brothels were often housed in saloons, and the women who worked there were sharp, resourceful, and usually tougher than the men they served. You wouldn't dare underestimate her. She probably knows how to load a Colt revolver blindfolded and could gut you with a hairpin before you finish saying howdy. As she crosses the room, a man claps her rear. She spins, slaps him with the force of a freight train, and he laughs like he's just been kissed by God. You shift awkwardly in your seat. This is a place of performances, cards, drinks, flirtation, violence, all of it carefully choreographed and dangerously real. Your second drink goes down easier, probably because your tongue has lost all feeling. You make the mistake of looking into your cup and spot something floating. You stop drinking. Suddenly, a man bursts into the saloon, panting and wild-eyed. "Stagecoach just got held up out by Widow's Ridge," he shouts. Everyone groans, not out of concern, but mild annoyance. One man tosses down his cards. "Third time this month," he mutters. Stagecoach robberies were shockingly common and weirdly romanticized, but they were terrifying. Real-life bandits had names like Rattlesnake Pete or Three Finger Jack, and they made their living by taking other people's money, horses, and occasionally sandwiches. You hear someone mutter about forming a posse. Another suggests letting the bandits keep it. They're only stealing mail anyway. Mail that likely includes 10-cent catalogs, overdue tax notices, and one sad, crumpled love letter. There's a moment of stillness, then everything returns to normal. Cards shuffle. The piano resumes. Someone asks for another drink. The robbery will be a story tomorrow, maybe a bounty by the end of the week. You stand up and decide it's time to leave. Not because you're bored, but because the man with the scar above his eye has been watching you too long. And your instincts, however new, are screaming that this is not a place to linger. Back on the street, the sun is merciless. Your boots kick up more dust than a stampede, and you cough it down like it's dessert. You hear the clang of a blacksmith's hammer nearby, the whinny of a nervous horse, and someone yelling about stolen chickens. You pass a row of hitching posts, and one horse bares its teeth at you. You flinch. Another test you're not ready for: animal handling. But that's coming next, and it won't be pretty. You approach the livery stable with cautious optimism, because surely riding a horse can't be that hard. Movies make it look so smooth. A leap into the saddle, a quick nudge, and you're galloping into the sunset with the wind in your hair and the bad guys far behind. In reality, it's more like climbing a wobbly fence post while trying not to scream. The stable smells like every bad decision a barn animal has ever made. You try breathing through your mouth, but then you taste it, and that's worse. A grizzled stable hand eyes you suspiciously, probably noting your fresh face and clean hands. He says nothing, just gestures toward a brown mare that looks, frankly, tired of everyone's nonsense, including yours. Her name is Mabel, and she's a veteran of countless supply runs a stampede, and at least one lightning strike. She stares at you with the same judgmental energy as a high school guidance counselor. You attempt to mount her. You fail. You try again. She sighs audibly. Eventually, with some creative contortion and a bit of dignity loss, you settle into the saddle, legs flailing slightly like an upturned beetle. The stable hand mutters, "Don't pull too hard on the reins. And for heaven's sake, don't scream if she bolts." Great. So bolting is on the table. You cluck your tongue. Mabel does not move. You nudge her with your heels. She turns her head and glares. Finally, you offer a quiet apology, and for reasons known only to her, she decides to walk. The ride starts off pleasant. If you ignore the constant jostling, the chafing in places you didn't know could chafe, and the eerie sensation that your knees no longer belong to you. Fact, horses were everything out here. Transportation, status symbol, getaway vehicle, coworker. Without one, you might as well sit on a cactus and wait for the vultures. Towns had more horses than people, and losing one, it wasn't just inconvenient, it could be a death sentence. Historians still argue whether the relationship between rider and horse was more utilitarian or emotional. But one thing's for sure, your bond with Mabel is currently non existent. You try steering her left toward the trading post. She goes right. You pull gently. She digs in her hooves. Then, with a sudden and unnerving burst of energy, she takes off at a slow trot, bumpy enough to shake every organ in your body loose. You pass townsfolk on foot, who stare at you like you're on fire, probably because you're bouncing like a sack of potatoes with stage fright. After what feels like a week, actually 7 minutes, you dismount, if falling off counts, and limp toward the general store. The sign above the door reads, Trading Post, Dry Goods, Tools, and Tobacco. Inside, the air is thick with dust and mystery. Wooden shelves creak under the weight of canned beans, pickled onions, and dubious remedies that promise to cure everything from scurvy to heartbreak. You spot a jar labeled Doctor, Goods Liver Tonic. It's mostly alcohol, some opium, and a splash of peppermint. Welcome to medicine in the 1800s. Behind the counter is a shopkeeper who doesn't look up as you enter. He's scribbling notes with the intensity of someone tracking life or death bean inventory. You clear your throat. Got any saddle balm? You ask, hoping it exists. He nods toward a back shelf, never breaking eye contact with his ledger. You weave through barrels and crates, passing sacks of flour, a stack of Winchester rifles, and a display of chew tobacco that features a cartoon cowboy grinning, despite having only 2 teeth. You grab the balm and a stick of jerky, which is so hard it could double as a weapon. At the counter, you hand over a silver coin, then realize you might have overpaid by about $3. The shopkeeper pockets it without a word. No refunds here. No price tags either. Just haggling and the vague hope you're not being swindled. You step back outside into the glare, grateful the saddle balm might save at least some part of your anatomy. You're about to remount Mabel when something buzzes past your ear, a giant, angry blur of nature. You swat. Bad move. Bees. You flail and run like a fool, Mabel watching with what you swear is silent laughter. Eventually, the buzzing fades, and you find yourself near the edge of town, where a man is trying to shoe a horse that has absolutely no interest in being shoed. The blacksmith curses softly under his breath, hammering with one hand while keeping an eye on the horse's hind leg. Shoeing horses was both an art and a hazard. A wrong tap or poorly placed nail, and you've got a lame horse and a furious owner. Blacksmiths were among the most respected and overworked members of the community. They fixed everything: shoes, wagon wheels, broken tools, even guns. A boy nearby offers water from a metal dipper, and you accept gratefully. It tastes slightly of rust and something vegetal, but you don't care. It's wet. Then you hear it, the distant pop of gunfire. Just one shot. Then silence. People glance toward the hills. The sound is far, but not far enough. Could be outlaws. Could be a warning. Could be someone who just remembered how bad this jerky tastes. You feel a pang of nerves. Town life might be uncomfortable and dusty, but the real danger lies just beyond the horizon, out in the scrublands and canyons, where men disappear and reappear with new names and shorter tempers. You glance back at Mabel. She huffs. You sigh. You both know you're not ready for what's coming next, because you're about to leave town. And in the Wild West, that's when things really start to go wrong. You leave the edge of town just after noon, when the sun is high and unforgiving. Every patch of shade has vanished like a lie under cross-examination. Your canteen is full, your jerky is tough, and well, Mabel is trudging along with the slow, deliberate pace of someone deeply unimpressed with your survival odds. The terrain changes quickly. Wooden sidewalks and dusty storefronts give way to wide, open plains dotted with brittle sagebrush and the occasional weather-beaten fence. The silence is eerie. No cars, no humming power lines, no chitter of modern life, just the rhythmic clop of hooves and the distant cry of something you'd rather not identify. The road, or more accurately, the path of least resistance, is dry, cracked earth scattered with rocks sharp enough to fillet your soul. Your boots, not yet broken in, are staging a protest with every step. Your thighs are beginning to understand the true meaning of inner torment. The sun keeps rising somehow. You didn't know it could get higher. Shadows shorten, sweat drips from your temples, and your shirt clings to you like a desperate ex. You fantasize about lemonade, or air conditioning, or reincarnation. You pass a carcass, a bloated steer that's become a buffet for vultures. One of them eyes you, perhaps a bit too eagerly. The Wild West has a recycling program. You're starting to suspect you're biodegradable. Fact. Traveling even 10 miles could take the better part of a day, especially if you're not on a rail line. The railroads were growing, yes, but much of the West remained stubbornly resistant to modern convenience. Freight wagons were still king, and roads were mostly optimistic suggestions. A jackrabbit darts across your path, then another. They're fast, so fast you feel mocked. You think about chasing one for sport, but then remember, you nearly sprained your dignity getting off Mabel this morning. You pause at a creek. It's barely a trickle, more suggestion than sustenance. You dismount, carefully this time, and let Mabel drink. You crouch down and splash your face. The water is cool and slightly metallic. Could be fine. Could be cholera's love letter. Historians still argue whether settlers filtered their water with cloth because it helped or just because it felt helpful. Either way, you filter it through your bandana, and it tastes like regret and river pebbles. You push onward. The terrain changes again. Scrub gives way to rocky inclines. You're climbing now, slowly. Mabel grunts, and you mutter encouragement, like, "Come on, girl," and "I swear I'll give you oats if we live." She remains unconvinced. Suddenly, a rustle. You freeze. Out from the brush steps a rattlesnake, coiled like a tense conversation. Its tail buzzes. A warning, not a question. You back away, heart doing its own gallop. The snake watches, then slithers off. You exhale. Realize you've stopped breathing. Welcome to the West, where even the wildlife has an attitude. You ride on, senses now dialed up to 11. Every breeze could be a puma. Every twig crack, a warning. You're not just out of town, you're out of your depth. Eventually, you come across an old homestead. It's been abandoned a while. Roof caved in, fence falling apart, the whole place leaning like it's trying to lie down and die. You dismount and investigate, because that's what people do in stories right before things go badly. Inside, it's cooler. Dust motes dance in the slanted light. There's a rusted stove, a broken chair, and a wall scrawled with some forgotten child's tally marks. Days lived or days left. You find a tin box under a floorboard. Inside, a faded photo of a woman, a few buttons, and a coin from the East Coast. You wonder who they were, what happened. You wonder if someone will find your canteen and bandana one day and wonder the same. Outside, Mabel whinnies impatiently. You saddle up and press on. By late afternoon, you reach a narrow gulch, cliffs, rising on both sides, the kind of place where an ambush would be right at home. You swallow hard and enter. The air cools in the shade of the cliffs, but your nerves sizzle. Every sound echoes. You keep your hand near the revolver you bought back in town. You don't know how to use it, but maybe it'll scare someone, or at least confuse them. Halfway through, you spot hoof prints. Not yours. Fresh. Too fresh. You quicken the pace. Mabel senses it too. Her ears flick back, muscles tense. At the far end of the gulch, you hear a faint cough. Not yours. Then voices. Low. Laughing. You stop, heart thudding. Outlaws? Ranch hands? A group of tired cowboys playing cards? You can't see them yet, but you can feel them. This isn't a movie. You don't get to be Clint Eastwood. You get to be unnamed traveler number 3, found later. You slowly guide Mabel off the trail behind a rocky outcropping. You wait and wait. Eventually, the voices fade. You wait longer, just in case. Time drips like molasses. Finally, you ease out of the gulch and into the setting sun. You've made it. For now. But the landscape is only getting rougher. You realize that today was the easy part. Tomorrow, you sleep under the stars, with snakes, scorpions, and skies too big to trust. And you still have no idea how to start a fire. You've officially made camp, though that word suggests a lot more preparation and a lot fewer bugs than your current situation offers. The sun has dipped below the distant hills, and the air has cooled. Gratefully at first, and then aggressively. Turns out, the desert doesn't do moderation. It's feast or famine, fire or frost. You try to build a fire. Emphasis on try. You've got a few dry twigs, a bunch of sagebrush, and your overconfidence, which, as it turns out, is not flammable. Striking a match, you manage to light a small pile of kindling. It flickers hopefully. You feed it more twigs, holding your breath like you're trying to will it into existence. It dies faster than your New Year's resolutions. You scrounge around for more fuel, finally managing to coax a modest flame to life. It's not much, but it's enough to see by. And more importantly, it's enough to keep the darkness from completely swallowing you whole. There's no tent, just a coarse wool blanket and a lumpy bedroll that smells like whoever used it last had strong opinions about soap. You lie back under the stars, and for a moment, you understand why people romanticize this place. The sky is enormous, endless black velvet studded with pinpricks of silver. You can see the Milky Way. You wonder why it's called Milky, and then realize it's because it kind of looks like someone spilled milk across space. Poetic, if slightly dairy-themed. You chew on some jerky that feels like it was cured in vengeance and stare into the flames. You're tired. Not just sleepy. Soul tired. Your body aches in new and interesting ways. Muscles you didn't know existed are registering formal complaints. Then, somewhere in the distance, a coyote howls. It's not exactly close, but it's close enough to send a chill up your spine. The night sounds change after that. Crickets fade. Silence swells. You feel like you're being watched, even though you probably aren't. Probably. Still, you clutch your pistol a little tighter under the blanket, even though you couldn't hit the side of a barn if it was hugging you. It's the thought that counts. Quirky fact: some cowboys used to sleep with their boots on, not because it was comfortable, but because they didn't want to waste time lacing up in case of a nighttime ambush or stampede. You try it for about 4 minutes before deciding you'd rather risk death than sleep with your feet encased in leather anvils. You try to drift off, but the ground is unforgiving. Every root and rock is a personal insult. You toss, you turn, you curse your ancestors for not inventing memory foam a few centuries earlier. And then, rustling. Not dramatic movie rustling, just enough to send your brain into overdrive. Is it a raccoon? A rattlesnake? A bandit who moonlights as a raccoon? You freeze. The rustling stops. You close your eyes. Maybe if you don't see it, it won't see you. That works for toddlers and tax season, right? Eventually, exhaustion wins. You slip into a shallow, restless sleep filled with dreams of stampeding cattle, dinner plates, and soft hotel pillows. You wake every hour or so, just to make sure the fire's not out, or to swat away a mosquito that seems emotionally invested in your earlobe. By dawn, the fire is just embers, and your breath fogs in the cold. Your back is now permanently shaped like a question mark, and your blanket has absorbed enough dew to qualify as a small pond. But hey, you made it through the night. That counts. Sort of. The next task? Breakfast. You have two options: more jerky or a sad tin of beans. You opt for the beans, heating them in a blackened pot over your newly revived fire. They bubble ominously. The smell is vaguely edible. You take a bite. It's food adjacent. Maybe. You pack up camp, which is really just folding your damp blanket and strapping it back to Mabel, who looks at you like she's reconsidering this partnership. The morning sun climbs quickly, warming your stiff fingers and evaporating the last of the night's discomfort. You saddle up, creak back into position, and start the day's ride. Your legs protest immediately. Your tailbone sends up flares. You ride on anyway. Mid-morning brings your first real challenge: a river crossing. Now, when you hear river, you probably picture something majestic: flowing water, maybe a nice little stone bridge. That's adorable. Out here, river means a shallow, muddy mess, bordered by uncertain ground and the promise of wet socks. You prod Mabel forward. She hesitates, then trudges into the muck. The water's cold and surprisingly deep in places. Your boots get soaked. A frog jumps and nearly causes you to fall off the saddle. You make it across, soaked but alive, and give Mabel a grateful pat. She grunts, probably the Wild West version of "You're welcome." Historians still argue whether most settlers preferred rivers to overland trails, or vice versa. Rivers were unpredictable, but trails were long and full of thieves. Basically, you could drown or be robbed. Choose your own adventure. As the day unfolds, you see fewer signs of life. No farms, no shacks, just miles of sun-baked wilderness. Every bush looks like it wants to stab you. Every buzzard looks hungry. And then, on the horizon, a shape: smoke. You ride toward it, cautious but curious. Maybe it's another traveler, maybe a ranch, or maybe, just maybe, a campfire where someone else is also chewing regrettable beans. You draw closer. A small wagon sits tilted in the dirt, wheel broken. A lone man stands beside it, waving. You approach slowly. He smiles, sunburned and missing a few teeth, and asks if you've got a spare nail. You don't, but you offer jerky. He accepts it like gold. You exchange a few words. He's headed east. His axle snapped yesterday, and he's hoping a miracle comes along. Today, that miracle is you and your awkward conversation skills. You share his fire for a bit. He tells you about cattle drives and a time he almost joined a traveling circus, but got scared of clowns. You laugh. It's the first real human interaction you've had in a day. It feels strange, warm even. Eventually, you saddle up again and say your goodbyes. As you ride off, You realize surviving out here isn't just about weather and snakes and bad beans. It's also about people and whether or not you're lucky enough to find the kind who share their fire. You and Mabel are back on the trail, the morning sun rising higher, burning off the last wisps of chill clinging to your clothes. The landscape rolls out in muted browns and golds, dotted with distant sagebrush, and an occasional lonely cactus standing like a silent sentinel. It's quiet out here, so quiet that the creak of your saddle and the rhythmic clop of Mabel's hooves feel almost intrusive. Your muscles are sore in all the places you expected, and a few you didn't. Riding a horse might look majestic from a distance, but in practice, it's a masterclass in slow, chafing discomfort. You try shifting in the saddle, but there's no such thing as a truly comfortable position on this journey. Everything feels like a mild form of punishment. By midday, you reach a fork in the trail. There's no sign, no guidepost, just two dusty tracks, diverging like a very unhelpful Robert Frost poem. You squint at both, trying to recall anything from your hand-drawn map, which, let's be honest, looks like it was sketched by a sleepy toddler with a crayon. You pick the left path, mostly because Mabel turns that way without consulting you. Trust the animal, right? The path narrows, winding through a rocky gulch. The walls rise on either side, high and dry, casting shadows that offer fleeting relief from the sun. It's beautiful, in a desolate, slightly sinister kind of way. You keep one hand near your holster, just in case. You've watched enough westerns to know this is the part where things usually go sideways. You hear something up ahead, metal striking rock, followed by the unmistakable grunt of effort. Rounding a bend, you spot a man hacking away at the stone wall with a pickaxe. He looks like he spent most of his adult life arguing with geology. His beard is tangled, his shirt is open, and his face is streaked with sweat and hope. You stop at a safe distance. He notices you and waves, calling out in a voice hoarse from sun and solitude. Turns out he's a prospector, out here hunting gold. His claim, he insists, is the real deal. Rich with promise, overflowing with potential. Just one more swing of the pick, and he'll strike it rich. You nod, smile politely, and offer him some water. He thanks you, pours a bit into his dusty hat, and drinks from the brim like a thirsty cowboy version of a flower pot. You ask how long he's been at it. 5 years, he says. You try not to let your eyebrows leap off your face. Mainstream historical fact. During the gold rush years, thousands of prospectors fanned out across the American West chasing dreams of wealth. But for every lucky soul who struck it rich, hundreds found only broken tools, bad luck, and a lifelong sunburn. The prospector points at a pile of rocks and starts explaining the veining patterns like he's reading poetry. You nod along, even though he lost you at quartz. There's something both inspiring and heartbreaking about him. He might never find gold, but he believes. And sometimes, belief is enough to keep you swinging. You leave him with a little jerky and a sympathetic smile, continuing down the trail as he resumes his rhythmic hacking against centuries of unyielding stone. The terrain changes again, flatter, dustier, with thorny mesquite and the occasional tumbleweed rolling by like it's auditioning for a cliché. A jackrabbit darts across your path, ears flopping like nervous flags. You laugh, startling Mabel, who responds with a snort that smells like hay and judgment. Time stretches. The sun climbs. You drink warm water from your canteen, and it tastes like aluminum and disappointment. Lunch is another hard biscuit, which might actually be a fossilized potato. You try to imagine what a fresh apple would taste like. It's a dangerous fantasy. You pass an old wooden sign nailed to a crooked post. It reads, Dead Mule Pass. You don't ask what happened to the mule. The trail narrows again, winding up into low, dry hills. You have to dismount and lead Mabel over some especially treacherous ground, where the rocks shift underfoot, like they've got somewhere else to be. Your boots scrape. Your breath comes short. Your shirt clings with sweat. You keep going. Fringe tidbit. Some frontier folk used to tie tin cans to their saddles or wagons to scare off mountain lions. Apparently, nothing says stay back like the Wild West version of a toddler's percussion kit. Eventually, you crest the hill, and below lies a small town. At least it used to be. You ride in slowly. The buildings are bleached husks, windows shattered, doors swinging. The saloon is missing most of its roof, and the jail's cell bars are bent outward, like something decided it didn't care for confinement. A broken wagon wheel leans against what might have once been a general store. A ghost town. One of dozens dotting the West, born from hope and left behind when the gold ran out. The railroad passed it by, or someone sneezed in the wrong direction and triggered a stampede. Historians still argue whether ghost towns were abandoned gradually or suddenly. But the result's the same. Silence, decay, and a strange feeling like you've stumbled into someone else's memory. You dismount and explore carefully, boots crunching over shattered glass and dried leaves. You poke your head inside the saloon, half expecting a ghost piano to start playing. It doesn't. There's just a toppled bar, an old bottle, and a deck of cards half buried in dust. You find a rusted horseshoe, tuck it into your pack. Maybe for luck, maybe just for something to do. The silence here feels thick, like the town is holding its breath. Back outside, Mabel waits, clearly unimpressed by your archaeology. You saddle up again and move on, leaving behind the ghost of ambition and a town that dreamed big, but didn't dream forever. The trail continues, winding westward. The sun begins its slow descent, casting everything in amber light. Shadows grow longer. You pass a single boot by the side of the trail, its mate nowhere in sight. You try not to think about it too much. Another hour of riding, and you reach a crossroads, a proper one this time. A few signposts lean against the wind. Silver Junction, 8 miles. Red Rock, 12 miles. Fort Yarrow, 15 miles. You weigh your options. Silver Junction is closest. You choose it, mostly because your backside is staging a rebellion, and the idea of a warm meal, even a questionable one, is too good to pass up. You turn Mabel toward the setting sun and begin the last stretch of the day's journey. You're tired, filthy, possibly permanently attached to this saddle, but you're still alive. And out here, that's not nothing. Silver Junction appears on the horizon like a mirage with plumbing problems. From a distance, it looks half abandoned. Just a handful of buildings clustered around a dusty main road, one of which leans so dramatically you instinctively reach out to straighten it. But there's smoke coming from a chimney, and someone's hammering something behind the livery stable. So hey, that counts as bustling in Wild West terms. You ride into town as the sun kisses the horizon, bathing everything in a golden haze that almost makes the place look charming. Almost. A few townsfolk glance up as you approach. Dusty faces under broad-brimmed hats, wary eyes peeking through torn curtains. Everyone sizing you up the way you'd eye a mysterious Tupperware in the fridge. You're new. That makes you interesting. and possibly dangerous, or at least likely to cause mild inconvenience. You tie Mabel to the hitching post in front of the saloon, which has the creatively vague name, the Red Door. The door itself is, in fact, red, though more out of rust than paint. You step inside, pushing through swinging bat-wing doors that screech like they're in pain. The interior is dim, smoky, and smells like spilled beer, old wood, and broken dreams. A piano sits in the corner, unplayed, and slightly off-key just by existing. A handful of locals sip drinks at scattered tables, and the barkeep, a wide man with a handlebar mustache and an expression that says he's seen things, nods in your direction. You order something strong and cheap. He pours you a shot of something the color of battery acid and roughly the consistency of regret. You sip it because hydration is hydration, mainstream historical fact. Many frontier saloons doubled as hotels, post offices, or even temporary morgues. Sometimes all at once. Frontier real estate was all about multifunctionality. You sit at the bar, trying to look casual while your body considers whether it's safe to release its current clench. It's been a long day. Your skin is coated in a fine paste of dust and horse sweat. Your jaw aches from biting down during rough stretches of trail. You glance around and realize everyone here looks just as wrecked as you feel. A man slides into the seat next to you. He's thin, wiry, with a nervous twitch, and a hat that's seen more years than he has. He introduces himself as Hollow Pete, which you assume is either a nickname or a grim autopsy result. Pete starts talking about the town, the mines, the sheriff who left 6 months ago and never came back. You'll want to keep your head down in Silver Junction, he mutters, eyes darting. There's rules here, but no one agrees on what they are. He then offers to sell you a map to buried Confederate gold, which is honestly the least weird thing you've heard today. Fringe tidbit. Fake treasure maps were a mini industry in frontier towns. Con men sold them to wide-eyed newcomers looking for fortune. Most of the maps led to nowhere. A few led to outhouses. You decline politely, and Pete shrugs, sipping something from a dented tin cup that probably shouldn't be legally classified as a beverage. Outside, the last light fades, and the saloon begins to fill with a strange mix of tension and music. A woman in a faded blue dress plays a few soft notes on the piano, her back straight, eyes distant. A card game starts in the corner. Laughter rings out, then dies off quickly. The mood in here shifts like sand under a boot. You decide to check into the upstairs rooms, assuming they rent them to non-locals. Turns out they do, barely. The room you get is approximately the size of a coffin with higher ceilings. The bed consists of a wooden frame, a lumpy mattress stuffed with something that crinkles, and one sad pillow that smells like regret and pipe smoke. Still, it's better than the ground. You collapse onto the mattress and stare at the ceiling, which features a single dangling spider and what looks suspiciously like a bullet hole. Your boots are off, your feet ache, and your stomach growls. Historians still argue whether early frontier inns offered meals regularly or only during supply deliveries. But in your case, dinner is a stale piece of cornbread wrapped in a napkin, probably left over from the Civil War. As you lie in bed, the sounds of the saloon below fade into background static. Someone yells. Someone else laughs. A chair scrapes across the floor. You shut your eyes and let your body sink into something that might pass for rest. Except, nope, not yet. A thud jolts you awake. Footsteps in the hallway. Then silence. Then a creak. You sit up slowly. It's probably nothing. Could be someone stumbling to their room or the floorboards settling. Still, you quietly reach for your saddlebag, feeling for the knife you tucked inside, just in case. You wait. Nothing happens. You lie back again, slower this time, trying to will your muscles into relaxation. And then, a scream. High, sharp, then cut off. You sit bolt upright. For a moment, no one moves. Then you hear hurried boots below, shouting, a door slamming. The saloon erupts into chaos. You throw on your boots, grab your bag, and head downstairs. The bartender is yelling. Someone's crying. And a man is clutching his side, blood leaking between his fingers. There's a trail of it on the floor, and another man being restrained by two others, struggling and snarling. You catch fragments of the story. A card game gone wrong. Someone cheated. Or maybe someone thought someone cheated. The sheriff's still gone. No one wants to call the marshal. Too much paperwork. Frontier justice is swift and largely fueled by whiskey. You step back into the shadows, keeping your head low. This isn't your fight. You're just passing through, remember? Eventually, things calm down, or at least return to their usual level of simmering chaos. The wounded man is dragged upstairs. The cheater, if he was one, is tossed out into the street. People go back to their drinks like nothing happened. The piano even starts up again. You head outside, needing air. The night is cool, dry, and full of stars. You lean against a post and breathe. This place, this entire world, runs on a kind of energy that never quite settles. Everyone's got a story, a grudge, a reason to watch their back. And you're just a tourist in someone else's fever dream. Mabel is still tied up, asleep, standing up like the rock star she is. You pat her flank and whisper something reassuring. She grunts. Tomorrow, you'll ride again. Find another town. Try not to get stabbed. But for tonight, you just want rest. Actual rest. The kind that doesn't come with screams and flying chairs. Back upstairs, you lock the door, which might be symbolic more than functional, and wedge a chair under the knob. Then, finally, you curl up in your lumpy bed and let the sounds of distant bootsteps lull you to sleep. Sort of. The morning arrives not with the gentle warmth of sunbeams or the comforting aroma of breakfast, but with a rooster that sounds like it, gargled gravel, and a church bell being rung by what you can only assume is a man with unresolved rage issues. You jolt awake, momentarily forgetting where you are, until the ceiling with the bullet hole and cobwebs reintroduces itself. Your back protests as you sit up. Sleeping on the mattress was like being gently pressed between two loaves of stale bread. The cornbread napkin from last night lies half-eaten on the nightstand. You briefly consider finishing it. Then remember, you're not that desperate. Yet. You make your way downstairs, boots echoing in the quiet saloon. The bartender is sweeping broken glass into a pile. He nods at you, and you nod back. Mutual recognition of two people who witness more than they'd like. Outside, the town is starting to buzz. Sort of. A kid chases a chicken past a man hauling sacks of flour. A woman hangs laundry from a line strung between two leaning buildings. Life here is stitched together with routines so old they've turned into muscle memory. You ask the bartender where you can get breakfast. He points toward a shack at the end of the street. "Ma Ollie's," he grunts. "Don't ask what's in the gravy." A perfect recommendation. Ma Ollie's is a squat building that smells like bacon, onions, and something slightly chemical. You sit at a rickety table while a stout woman in a bonnet serves you a plate of grayish biscuits, a scoop of what she calls gravy, and something egg adjacent. You eat because your stomach insists. Mainstream historical fact. Frontier diets were heavy on salt pork, beans, and hard biscuits known as hardtack. Vegetables were rare and usually boiled into oblivion. Scurvy was not just for sailors anymore. As you chew through the paste-like meal, a poster on the wall catches your eye. It's a wanted sign, hand-drawn, slightly faded, offering $200 for a man named Ezekiel Grint, also answers to Zeke the Fork. Armed, dangerous, fond of rhubarb pie. You look around. No one else seems impressed by the poster. You point at it, raising an eyebrow at Ma Ollie. She snorts. That's 4 years old. Zeke's probably dead. Or governor. You finish your meal, pay in dusty coins, and head back into the street. You'd planned to leave today. Ride out. Get away from Silver Junction. Before someone decides you look like a man who once cheated at cards. But then you see the crowd. Near the town square, or rather the wide dirt patch with a trough and a dead tree, people are gathered. You wander closer, weaving through townsfolk, muttering and fanning themselves with their hats. At the center of the crowd stands a tall man in a brown duster, flanked by 2 deputies and a very nervous-looking donkey. The man is speaking loudly, reading off a sheet of paper with dramatic pauses. Turns out, it's a town meeting. Silver Junction has decided it needs a new sheriff. The last one's boots were found near the canyon, still smoking. Candidates are few, and the man now reading is Deputy Horace, who looks like he was born tired and raised disappointed. You chuckle to yourself until someone taps you on the shoulder. It's Hollow Pete again. "They're looking at you," he whispers. "Outsiders make good sheriffs. No one knows your grudges or your blood feuds." You glance around. Eyes are indeed on you. Some curious, some hopeful, a few skeptical. "Nope," you say, raising both hands. "Absolutely not. I don't even know how to run a town. I barely know how to run a bath." Fringe tidbit. In some towns, the sheriff was chosen by whoever could shoot straightest or drink the most. Civic engagement had flexible criteria. Deputy Horace steps forward. "We need someone impartial. Someone brave. Someone who didn't flee town during last year's goat stampede." The crowd chuckles. Apparently, that's still a sore point. You shake your head again and start backing away, right into the donkey, who brays at you accusingly. Historians still argue whether frontier lawmen were respected enforcers or barely qualified placeholders who just survived the longest. The truth, like the saloon floor, is probably sticky, and somewhere in between. You finally extricate yourself from the gathering and make a beeline for Mabel. Your saddle's waiting, so is the road. But just as you reach her, you hear the clatter of hooves behind you. A cloud of dust appears on the edge of town. Riders. 5 of them. Faces obscured by scarves, hats low, rifles slung across their backs. Everyone on the street freezes. They ride in like a scene from an overly dramatic stage play, stopping near the general store. One of them dismounts and pulls down his scarf. It's not Zeke the Fork, but it might be someone worse. The man calls out, "We're collecting debts owed to the Black Dust Gang. You've got till sundown." And just like that, the town meeting becomes a panic. People scatter. Deputy Horace goes pale. Someone drops a pie. You watch the riders turn and trot back out of town, leaving only hoofprints and dread in their wake. Back at the saloon, the townsfolk huddle. Some argue about standing and fighting. Others pack their bags. Hollow Pete starts drawing his treasure map again. You sit quietly, the wheels in your head turning. This isn't your town. These aren't your people. But something gnaws at you. Maybe it's the dry biscuit you just ate. Or maybe it's the thought that if these people fold now, they'll keep folding forever. You don't stand up. Not yet. But you glance at your saddlebag, at the pistol tucked inside, at the badge lying on the counter, tarnished and forgotten. The same badge Deputy Horace placed there, just in case. You sigh. Of course, this isn't what you planned. You were supposed to ride into the next town, avoid getting stabbed again, and maybe find a bath with water warmer than regret. But the Wild West doesn't care about your plans. It just waits. You don't know exactly when your hand reaches for the badge, but somehow it's in your palm now. Cool, dented, and heavier than it looks. The bar room has gone quiet. Hollow Pete watches you like you've just swallowed a live scorpion. You serious? He croaks. No, you mutter, fastening the badge to your vest. But apparently, neither is anyone else. Deputy Horace exhales, like he's been holding his breath for 5 years. Well, I suppose that makes you acting sheriff. Great, you say. Do I get a hat that doesn't smell like mildew, or is that extra? Outside, the town doesn't know whether to celebrate or prepare a eulogy. A few folks look at you with cautious optimism. Others, especially the ones who still remember last year's pie fight debacle, look deeply concerned. You can't blame them. First order of business? Figure out who the Black Dust Gang actually is. Second, figure out why the town owes them anything. Third, try not to die before lunch. Deputy Horace joins you as you walk down the main street. He's got a clipboard with a splinter in it, a revolver that probably hasn't fired since the comet of 1811, and a mustache that takes up 40% of his facial energy. He explains in his usual tone of exhausted resignation. Black Dust Gang showed up about 3 months ago. They offered protection. Then they raised their rates. Then they shot the blacksmith's sign clean off his shop when he said no thanks. You glance around. That explains the warped chunk of metal half buried in the street. Mainstream historical fact. Protection rackets were a common feature in lawless frontier towns. Gangs offered to guard businesses from violence, usually the violence they themselves delivered when payment didn't arrive. As Horace drones on, you meet the rest of Silver Junction's power players. There's Eliza Mott, who runs the apothecary and once stitched a man's ear back on with horsehair. There's Pastor Jim, who's more comfortable with a shotgun than a sermon. And there's young Jasper, the telegraph operator, who mostly listens but blinks in Morse code when nervous. You huddle with them in the general store's back room. Hollow Pete invites himself in too, still chewing on a jerky stick of dubious origin. The plan is, well, a start. You figure the gang will be back at sundown, just like they promised. You need a show of resistance, not a shootout. You're not suicidal, but something that tells them Silver Junction isn't a collection of scared chickens hiding behind flour sacks. Fringe tidbit. In some desperate towns, store owners filled sacks with sand and arranged them as decoy fortifications. Others put up hand-painted signs reading things like, "No gold here," or "We're all very sick." Pastor Jim volunteers his church steeple as a lookout point. Jasper wires a message to the next town over, hoping maybe they've got a marshal who's feeling charitable. Eliza whips up a batch of tension tonic, which smells like licorice and hoof glue. You spend the afternoon walking the town perimeter, not because you expect to find anything, but because it helps you think. And then you hear it, singing. You follow the sound to a house near the outskirts. A woman, humming while hanging lanterns along her porch. She doesn't look scared, just tired, like she's been through worse. You ask if she's planning to leave. She shakes her head. Left once already. Didn't help. Besides, I got goats. Hard to argue with goat-based logic. As the sun begins to dip, the town gathers again. This time, not in panic, but with a strange sort of tension, like everyone's waiting for a storm that might decide to skip them this time. But no one's counting on it. Historians still argue whether these standoffs were brave acts of civic resistance or reckless gambles by people with nothing left to lose. Either way, they made for good stories, assuming someone survived to tell them. You position yourself near the saloon. Horace takes the church roof. Pastor Jim is in the bell tower with a long-barreled rifle and a Bible tucked into his belt. And then, dust. It rolls in like a blanket dragged across the prairie. Horses, 5 again, same riders, same scarves, same leader. But this time, they're not laughing. They rein up in the center of town. The leader dismounts. He's older than you expected. Gray at the temples, eyes like glass marbles that have seen too many fires. You the new lawman? He asks, voice even. You nod. He looks you up and down. Shiny badge. How long you planning to wear it? Long enough, you say, to ask why you're extorting a town that can't even afford eggs half the week. A low chuckle. He tosses you a bag of coins. It lands at your feet with a heavy thunk. Call it a loyalty fee. You don't bend down to pick it up. Instead, you take one step forward. You're not wanted here, you say. The gang members shift in their saddles. One cracks his knuckles. Another spits. And who's going to stop us? The leader asks. You? It's a fair question. But from behind you comes the distinct clatter of a dozen hammers being cocked. From windows, from rooftops, from behind barrels and broken fences, townsfolk emerge. They're not professionals. They're not trained. But they've got eyes that say, we're done being afraid. Eliza, apron still on, raises her pistol. You heard him. Hollow Pete waves a shovel. Y'all can leave vertical, or we'll dig holes for you ourselves. Even Mabel the mule lets out a honk of warning. Probably unintentional. Still counts. The leader looks around, evaluating, weighing his options. You see the exact moment the math doesn't add up in his favor. He spits once. We'll be back, he mutters. You smile just enough to make him nervous. We'll be waiting. They ride out. No shots fired, just dust and the long exhale of a town remembering how to breathe. As the sun sets, you pull the badge off and hand it back to Horace. I was never here, you say. He nods. You sure weren't? But as you walk toward Mabel, someone starts clapping, then another. And before you know it, the town is applauding the stranger who didn't plan to care, and did anyway. You mount Mabel, give her a pat, and guide her slowly toward the edge of town. Behind you, Silver Junction is still standing, barely, but standing all the same. You ride for a long while, letting Mabel set the pace, plodding, patient, and blissfully unaware that you just talked down a gang of outlaws with nothing but sarcasm, sweat, and the collective will of some very tired townsfolk. The prairie rolls out around you like an old rug, creased and sun-faded, but still clinging to beauty in its own dusty way. The sun is low behind you now, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers over the grass. You pass a few jackrabbits frozen in the moment, twitching with indecision. Out here, hesitation tends to get you eaten. You realize you haven't eaten either. There's half a biscuit in your coat pocket from this morning. Linty, but structurally sound. You chew it thoughtfully, staring at the trail ahead. You're not quite sure where you're going anymore. But after Silver Junction, anywhere feels slightly less impossible. Soon, your path splits near a small outcropping of rocks. Perched atop one is a wooden sign, dangling from one nail and tilting just enough to inspire dread. It reads, Camp Salvation, 2 miles. Underneath, someone scrawled in charcoal, Abandon hope, but we got stew. You steer Mabel toward it, because, well, stew. 2 miles later, you come upon the camp, a loosely arranged collection of tents, wagons, and one repurposed riverboat paddle wheel, acting as a windmill. It hums gently as the sun dips behind the hills. You're greeted by a man wearing a bowler hat and no pants. You here for the lecture or the beans? He asks. You blink. Beans. He nods solemnly and gestures you in. Mainstream historical fact. Makeshift frontier camps like these popped up everywhere during gold rushes, droughts, or regional panics. Often, they were led by eccentric figures who fancied themselves preachers, doctors, or philosophers, sometimes all three before lunch. Camp Salvation, as it turns out, is run by a woman named Sister Alma. She's tall, unsmiling, and walks with a staff carved with animal faces. No one seems to know if she's actually ordained. Most people are too scared to ask. You find a place near the center fire where stew is indeed being ladled into battered tin bowls. It's mostly beans, maybe a turnip or two, and a meat you hope is of the mammalian variety. It smells like possibility. You eat. Sister Alma stands before the crowd and begins her evening sermon. Not religious exactly, but passionate. She talks about survival, the great wheel of the world, and how a person needs 3 things to endure the West: a reason to keep moving, a skill that ain't for sale, and shoes that don't squeak. Fringe tidbit. In some frontier settlements, folks believed squeaky boots were cursed, especially if they squeaked while walking westward. They'd often toss them into rivers, creeks, or sometimes just burn them outright. After the meal, people gather to share news. A wagon was lost to quicksand 3 days east. A preacher with a snake bite was carried into town on the back of a cow. The railroad is coming. Maybe. One man claims he saw a creature in the desert with human hands and a goat's face. Sister Alma nods once. If it speaks, don't answer, she warns. You spend the night near the fire. The stars overhead are crisp and countless, spilling across the sky like someone's cracked open a jewelry box. You think about Silver Junction, about the strange calm that comes after fear, about whether that calm ever stays. Historians still argue whether these fringe camps helped or hindered frontier justice. Some became havens for runaway criminals. Others saved hundreds from starvation. Most eventually disappeared into the dust, remembered only in family diaries and disputed land deeds. The next morning, you're offered a hot drink that tastes like boiled shoe leather, and a chance to trade a story for a blanket. You trade the story of Silver Junction. People listen, a few nod. One man mutters, "About time someone stood up to black dust." You look up. "You've heard of them?" "Oh yeah," he says. "They've got camps in 3 states. No one knows where their main camp is, but folks say they answer to a man named Cinders. Doesn't blink, doesn't smile, just burns things he doesn't like." Great. Now they've got branding. You leave Camp Salvation with a fresh blanket, a tin of Alma's infamous victory paste, guaranteed to repel cougars and in-laws, and a head full of unease. Because if the Black Dust Gang isn't just a local problem, if they're part of something bigger, then Silver Junction may not be the only town that needs a stranger with a mule and a half-baked plan. You ride on. The land begins to change. The grass gets sparser. The wind kicks up grit instead of dust. Cacti appear, stubborn and sharp. The road becomes a suggestion more than a path. And just when you think you're ready to turn around, you see it. A town unlike any you've seen before. Bigger, louder, steam rising from engines, flags flapping, a train depot carved into the bones of a canyon, and at the center of it all, a gallows with a line. Dozens of folks queued up as if waiting for a barber shop, only instead of haircuts, they're watching trials. Or mock trials. It's hard to tell. You tie up Mabel, who seems thoroughly unimpressed, and wander in. A banner overhead reads, "Welcome to Hangtown. Justice served daily." The man currently being sentenced is accused of chicken thievery. The judge, who also runs the local bakery, finds him guilty and orders him to bake 12 apology pies. Public ones. You ask around. Turns out Hangtown's justice system is citizen enforced, meaning the loudest person with the cleanest boots often wins. Fairness is negotiable. And guess who's just been hired as their new marshal for hire? A bounty hunter named Glass Joe. Tall, sharp-eyed, a rifle across his back, and a reputation that makes kids cry, and grown men pretend they didn't just wet themselves. People whisper about him like he's more myth than man. You don't know it yet, but your path will cross his soon enough. For now, you sip lukewarm cactus tea, avoid eye contact with the pie criminal, and keep your ears open. Because Hangtown's justice might just make the Black Dust Gang look polite by comparison. You stick around Hangtown longer than you'd like. Not because it's charming, though the pie bakery does smell suspiciously like cinnamon redemption, but because the road ahead winds into what the locals ominously call the wailing draw, and apparently nobody with a healthy sense of self-preservation ventures into the draw past dusk, or noon, or, if they're really smart, at all. So you bide your time. Each day in Hangtown, the makeshift court holds another open session. The crimes are petty. Someone accused a neighbor of feeding their mule too loudly. Another man claims he was hypnotized by a fiddler into giving away his boots. You can't tell if the people are joking or just bored. Probably both. Glass Joe watches it all with the poise of someone who's been through real bloodshed and now finds all this deeply beneath him. He sits on the porch of the marshal's office, which also doubles as a dentist's shack, chewing jerky and polishing a revolver that looks older than most trees in the territory. Mainstream historical fact: Hangtown was a real frontier nickname for several rough mining towns, most notably Placerville, California. The name reflected a brutal sense of justice. Rope first, questions later. And while not every sentence led to a gallows, the threat loomed large. You try to blend in, help a few locals fix a broken water pump, even join in a communal yodeling contest, which turns out to be code for drunken shouting near livestock. You win third place and are awarded a half-melted candle. Fringe tidbit. Many frontier towns had informal contests or events that doubled as civic rituals. Some of these were practical, like axe throwing or tobacco spitting accuracy. Instead, he spits into the fire and mutters, "Let's hope you're not still carrying fear." And just like that, the next leg of your strange odyssey begins, with a half-eaten piece of candy in your pocket, a scarred marshal at your side, and the memory of vulture wings slicing across a red sky. You're not sure when this all stopped being a detour and started feeling like a destiny. But one thing is clear now. The Wild West isn't a place. It's a test. And yours isn't over yet. You wake before the sun. The fire's ashes are still warm, and a coyote somewhere is singing a solo so mournful it might just turn the sky gray. Glass Joe is already saddled up and silent, staring westward toward Shallow Creek like it owes him something. You check Mabel. Her ears twitch in mild protest, but she seems ready too. Or at least, not actively refusing. As you travel, the air thickens. Not with fog, but with something older, heavier, like the ground is holding its breath. You feel it? Joe asks without looking. You nod, though you don't know what you're feeling. There's a strange tension in your chest, like a string being slowly pulled tight. Shallow Creek appears suddenly, like it's been waiting just around the bend. The buildings lean like tired drunks. Their wood has turned gray, sun-bleached and brittle, but not broken. A crooked steeple pierces the sky, and dust devils whirl through the empty main street, performing silent sermons. You dismount, and even Mabel hesitates. Mainstream historical fact. Ghost towns like this were all too common. They sprang up around mining booms, rail stops, or cattle drives, then disappeared overnight when fortunes changed. Shallow Creek mirrors many such real places, abandoned yet oddly preserved, like a painting that forgot to finish itself. Joe leads you into what used to be the saloon. The door creaks in perfect horror movie fashion. Inside, shattered bottles still glitter in the corners, and there's a piano in the back with keys yellowed like old teeth. Someone has scrawled, "Give back what you took," on the mirror behind the bar, in soot or dried blood. You decide not to test it. Joe sets down his canteen and lights a lantern. The orange glow dances across walls that once saw laughter, poker games, bar fights, now all echoing as memory. Then he tells you the story. Years ago, Shallow Creek was rich in silver, too rich. Strangers arrived overnight, throwing up claims in tents and dreams. But greed came faster than law. A land baron named Elias Rook bought up most of the plots, legally or not, and bled the town dry. He paid off the sheriff, ran out families, and when a group tried to stand against him, they disappeared, literally, one by one. Not a body found. Fringe tidbit. Some real-life barons in boomtowns used private enforcers, often euphemistically called security men, to eliminate threats. In places with little oversight, they functioned more like corporate militias. There's even record of vigilante groups being quietly funded by rival mine owners. Rook built himself a manor at the edge of town and named it the Mirror House. Locals whispered it could reflect your future, or your guilt. Depends who you asked. One night, a fire tore through Shallow Creek. Half the town burned, the other half fled. And Rook? He was never seen again. Some say he's still inside, Joe mutters, wandering that house, trying to barter his way out. You ask why you're here? Joe shrugs. Sometimes justice takes a detour, and sometimes you need to look backward before moving forward. You wander the street alone for a bit. Each building seems to watch you. There's a post office, with envelopes still stacked behind the counter. A blacksmith shop with half-finished horseshoes. You imagine what life must have been like here, when people believed tomorrow would be better than today. Then you spot something odd. Footprints. Fresh ones. Boot prints in the dust, leading toward the church. You follow cautiously, every step a creak in your own bones. Inside, the pews are shattered. The altar is intact but covered in symbols, some carved, some painted. You can't read them, but they give you a migraine just trying. And then you hear breathing. Not yours, not Joe's. Slow, labored breathing, coming from behind the altar. You round the corner and find an old man slumped there. He looks half-starved, his beard like spiderwebs, eyes wild and sunken. He points a bony finger at you and whispers, "You see it too, don't you?" The cracks? They're in the walls now. In us, you freeze. Joe arrives behind you, gun drawn, but lowers it after a long pause. "Ezekiel," he mutters, "I figured you were dead." Ezekiel smiles like a jack-o'-lantern. "Not yet, Marshal. Not yet. But this place, it doesn't let go. It reflects." "Reflects what?" you ask, even though you're not sure you want the answer. "Regret," the old man says. "You leave him food and water. He doesn't stop you from leaving, just warns you not to look into the windows of the mirror." House after dark. Naturally, that's the next place Joe wants to go. You cross to the far side of town, where a cracked iron gate frames a crooked manor. The mirror house lives up to its name. Glass panes on every surface, all tinted with the age of bad decisions. You catch your reflection, and it seems older, sadder, like it's seen more than you have. "Don't stare too long," Joe says, stepping ahead. "This place likes to borrow faces." Inside, the air is colder. The floorboards groan beneath your feet, like they're trying to confess. Room after room is filled with mirrors, each one angled slightly wrong, creating infinite reflections that feel just a beat out of sync. Historians still argue whether the myths surrounding ghost towns like Shallow Creek were fueled by genuine folklore or carefully cultivated fear to keep scavengers out. Either way, some legends clung tight enough to feel real. You hear whispers, not voices exactly, but memories. A woman begging someone not to sign a deed, a child laughing, the crack of a whip, footsteps. In the final room, you find it. A massive mirror, unbroken, wrapped in silver filigree. It shows your reflection perfectly, but behind you stands a man in an old-fashioned suit with eyes like coal. You turn. No one there. You look again. Gone. Joe touches your shoulder. "Seen enough?" You nod, heart pounding. You exit the house and leave Shallow Creek without looking back. Mabel's hooves are faster than usual. You can't tell if she's spooked or just eager to get away from all those mirrors. By sunset, the ghost town is a distant smudge behind you. And maybe you're imagining it, but your reflection in the canteen still doesn't quite smile when you do. Continue. You travel in silence for a while. Even Glass Joe, normally full of half-muttered old-timer wisdom and the occasional unsolicited humming, doesn't say a word. The air feels lighter now. Fewer ghosts breathing down your neck, but your spine still carries the echo of Shallow Creek's hush. Your next stop isn't marked on the map. You wouldn't have found it anyway. It finds you. Joe halts by a withered tree where someone once nailed a horseshoe, upside down, presumably for luck. It didn't work. You're surrounded by nothing, just a sweeping flatland of sagebrush and dust, the sun bleached into the color of a cracked yoke. He tells you to wait, then dismounts, and walks 20 paces east, then 15 south. You follow, obviously. Then he drops to one knee and brushes away the dirt. There, buried just beneath the surface, is a trapdoor. You both heave it open. Cool air slithers out like a snake waking up. Below is a ladder, rusted and uneven, leading into a cellar that has no business existing in the middle of nowhere. "You ready?" he asks. You say yes, mostly because no wouldn't change anything at this point. You descend. Mainstream historical fact. During the Wild West era, countless outlaws, fugitives, and even revolutionaries carved out literal underground bunkers across the American frontier. Some served as escape routes, others were hideouts. A few, like this one, were sanctuaries, secret places built by people who knew they'd never be safe above ground. This place is big, much bigger than the outside would suggest. Torch sconces line the tunnel walls, and they're not as old as they should be. Someone's maintained this place recently. You come into a chamber lined with shelves, old leather-bound books, ledgers, dossiers. Joe lights one of the lanterns and starts thumbing through a file. He pulls out a hand-drawn map with dots and symbols and initials. One of them matches your initials. You ask what this is. He just says, everything they didn't want anyone to remember. Turns out, this is the archive, a place built by renegade journalists, whistleblowers, and disillusioned lawmen to record the truth before it was erased. Railroad conspiracies, cattle wars, land grab massacres, the real stories, uglier, messier, and more important than anything in the dime novels. There's a list of names carved into the wall. Some you recognize from history books, but here, they're not celebrated. They're indicted. Fringe tidbit. One notorious but little-known figure named Father Greer led a secret society in the New Mexico Territory dedicated to uncovering and publishing government-sanctioned atrocities. They used coded newspaper ads to signal drop-off points for stolen documents. Only one page of their internal code book has ever surfaced publicly, and historians still argue whether it's authentic or a hoax. You move deeper into the archive. There are rooms filled with artifacts, outlaw weapons labeled with dates and victims, notched revolvers, poisoned whiskey bottles, rusted spurs from riders who never took their boots off again. Each piece tells a story no one wanted to hear. There's even a cell block. 2 holding rooms with thick bars and faded tally marks etched into the walls. This one, Joe points, held the hangman of Prairie Rock, arrested, convicted, and vanished all within 1 week. No record in any courthouse, but he confessed here. You're overwhelmed. It's like stumbling onto a secret chapter in a book you thought you already finished. Every corner of the archive pulses with hidden history, and it's messy, because it has to be. Justice in the Wild West wasn't blind. It was blindfolded, gagged, and duct taped to the back of a galloping mule. Historians still argue whether places like this existed or are just part of the myth-making machine the frontier produced. Some claim it's all hearsay, built from scraps of diary entries and half-drunk bar tales. Others point to newspaper blackouts and mysteriously missing court records as proof something bigger was always being hidden. You find your own name again, scribbled in pencil on the back of a wanted poster. Joe says it's a precaution. When you ride through enough dust, he explains, eventually you leave tracks. Some folks out there want to keep the past buried. You spend the night in the archive. It's quiet, but not empty. You can feel the hum of 1,000 untold stories vibrating through the walls, like the place is alive and grateful to be remembered. In the morning, before you leave, Joe pulls a leather-bound journal from the shelf and hands it to you. It's blank. You'll write what happens next, he says. Outside, the desert air feels new again. The sun hasn't even fully risen yet, but the sky is already bright with promise, or maybe warning. Depends on how you look at it. You saddle Mabel, journal tucked into your pack. Joe doesn't say goodbye. He just tips his hat and disappears back into the cellar like a memory you'll never quite get to tell anyone about. You ride on, but something has changed. You're not just surviving anymore. You're remembering. And that, out here, is a dangerous kind of power. The desert stretches ahead like a faded parchment. The trail, nothing more than a suggestion carved by time and hoofbeats. You ride in silence for a while, the journal Joe gave you pressing against your back like an unsent letter. The dust kicks up in lazy spirals around Mabel's hooves, catching golden light as the sun claws its way above the horizon. You're heading toward the last stop. You just don't know it yet. The land flattens into a wide, empty basin, an old salt flat, cracked like old porcelain, glittering faintly with mineral dust. In the center sits a makeshift camp, nothing more than a few scorched timbers and a tilted sign, Camp Sorrow. That's the official name. Unofficially, they called it the place where even God blinked. Mainstream historical fact. During the late 1800s, Western territories were dotted with hastily built labor camps, some for railroad workers, others for mining or military infrastructure. Conditions were horrific. Camp Sorrow was one such place, used as a halfway station for prisoners leased out to private contractors, essentially forced labor in the middle of nowhere. Official records claim it closed after just 6 months due to supply issues. But there's evidence of bodies buried long after that date. You tie up Mabel and walk through what remains. Ashes, bone fragments, and rusted shackles partially buried beneath time and wind. A scorched pan still hangs from a bent nail. Someone's final meal, never finished. The scent is gone, but the silence smells like fear. You step into what used to be a bunkhouse, a plank floor half collapsed over a forgotten crawl space. You lift a rotted board and find carvings, names, dates, angry slashes. One reads, 17 days without water. They still send none. Another simply says, tell my ma I died tired. There are no ghosts here, just echoes so deep they ring in your ribs. You find a small tin in the dirt behind the mess tent. Inside are newspaper clippings, tied with a string. Headlines like, Worker Riots Quelled, Contagion Blamed for Labor Deaths, and the truly haunting, no one missing from camp, officials say. One tiny scrawl at the bottom of a page simply reads, Liars. Fringe tidbit. A group of Western spiritualists in the 1890s claimed Camp Sorrow was built on a psychic sinkhole, where human suffering collected like rain in a basin. They held seances here, reporting violent tremors and ghostly screams, until they stopped coming. Some believe they vanished without explanation. Others think they were buried alongside the laborers they tried to mourn. You sit for a while by the burned-out fire pit, journal in your lap. The pen feels heavier than it should. You scribble a sentence, just one, and pause. You want to get it right. You owe that to the names on the bunkhouse floor. But even now, you don't write it for them. You write it for the next lost soul who wanders into this place. The wind picks up. A dry, shrill whistle that coils around your ankles. You pack the journal, mount up, and turn Mabel east. One last ride. Historians still argue whether Camp Sorrow was an actual place or a patchwork of multiple camps stitched together by rumor and oral history. There are no official blueprints, no maps, no records in county archives, but the remains of the timbers, the shackles, and the pan say otherwise, as do the names scraped into the wood like the last breaths of men no one came to save. You ride out across the flats, salt crunching beneath Mabel's hooves, like thin ice. You don't look back, because the Wild West doesn't give you closure. It gives you perspective. It gives you memories you didn't ask for and scars you'll carry forever. Some visible, some carved into the mind like those tally marks in the archive's jail cell. And now, you're finally leaving it. Not the land, not the people, but the trial. You've made it to the edge. The desert fades into foothills, then to trees. Real ones, not just tumbleweeds or scorched mesquites. You pass into the kind of land with creeks and birdsong. The air shifts from dust to pine. You've survived the Wild West, but let's be honest, barely. You've been shot at, chased, sunburned, snowblind, nearly scalped, financially ruined, and emotionally mugged by a prospector named Randy. You've eaten squirrel jerky, bathed in a cow trough, and faced your own insignificance in a way only endless sky can deliver. The Wild West didn't kill you, but it absolutely judged you. And you know what? You failed its test. That's okay. Most people did. Because this place wasn't meant for survival. It was meant to chew people up and spit them out, occasionally memorializing the lucky few in stone or song, while forgetting everyone else entirely. But you remember now, and that's enough. That's what keeps places like the archive breathing. You find a clearing with soft grass. The wind isn't so sharp here. You dismount, stretch, and lie down next to Mabel's saddlebag. The journal is still in there, waiting for more. But for now, you close your eyes, and the wind sounds a little like someone telling a story. The last of the sunlight fades through the trees, flickering like candlelight against the branches. The night air settles softly around you, not like the dry bite of the desert, but cool and cradling, gentle. You stretch out in the grass and take a long breath. The scent isn't dust anymore. It's pine and soil and a faint whiff of something sweet blooming just beyond sight. Maybe wildflowers, maybe memory. Your muscles ache in that warm, satisfied way, like you've hiked through time and now, finally, your body gets to exhale. The saddle soreness, the sunburn, the fear. It's all fading into something softer now. Somewhere, a night bird sings. You open your journal one more time. Not to write, just to feel the weight of it in your hands. There's peace in that, knowing the page is blank, but your story isn't. You've earned that stillness. You've heard the truth whispered in cellars, seen history's teeth, tasted the wild grit of a world that doesn't want to be remembered. And yet, here you are. And maybe that's all survival ever really is. Not winning, just witnessing, and carrying that forward into the quiet. So let your eyes get heavy. Let the sounds of the night carry you into sleep. The Wild West will keep spinning its dust and legend long after you've drifted off. But for now, you're safe, you're warm, you're home. End of script. Sweet dreams.